Introduction. There is a hidden strength in a quiet temperament, a subtle but potent force that is often overlooked in a world clamoring for attention. It is a mistake to view a reserved nature as a deficiency. Rather, it is a dormant superpower waiting to be recognized and harnessed. Those who spend much of their time dwelling in the landscape of their own minds are not merely detached or shy. They are thinkers, processing the world with a depth that requires silence. It is within this solitude that the seeds of great ideas are often sown, germinating in the quiet before they ever break the surface of conversation. We possess a unique elasticity, much like a rubber band. We are capable of stretching ourselves to meet the demands of a loud and vibrant world, stepping into the spotlight when necessary, and doing anything an extrovert can do. There is no barrier to our capabilities, only a difference in our fuel. We can lead, we can speak, and we can engage, knowing always that the sanctuary of quiet awaits us when the task is done. It is vital, however, to remember that after stretching, the rubber band must return to its resting state. Returning to one's true self is not a retreat, but a necessary act of restoration. In the realm of connection, depth far outweighs breadth. A circle of 2 or 3 cherished friends, with whom walls come down and truths are spoken, holds more weight than 100 fleeting acquaintanceships, though those, too, have their place. This preference for intimacy over crowds is not a rejection of others, but a celebration of meaningful bonds. Introverts and extroverts are not opposing forces destined to clash, but the yin and yang of humanity. We require each other to form a complete whole, loving and needing the balance the other provides. There is no shame in the small acts of self-preservation that define our days. It is entirely permissible to cross a hallway to avoid the drain of small talk, just as it is valid to preserve one's energy for the interactions that truly matter. Leadership does not require a megaphone or a cheerleader's pom-poms. History is replete with those who led with a whisper rather than a shout. One need only look to Mahatma Gandhi to see that strength does not always roar. As he so profoundly demonstrated, it is possible to shake the world, not with force, but in a gentle way. Why are you so quiet? It is a question that echoes through the lives of many, posed by teachers, friends, and even strangers. Often the inquiry is well-intentioned, a check-in to ensure everything is all right. But sometimes it carries a subtle weight, a suggestion that silence is an anomaly, something to be fixed. For a long time, the answer to this question was elusive. Was the silence born of deep thought, a preference for listening, or was it simply the natural state of being? In the landscape of schools and social gatherings, the quality of being outgoing is frequently hailed as the ultimate virtue. Teachers prod quiet students to raise their voices. Dance floors are seen as the only valid arena for fun, while the preference for a quiet dinner or a movie with a close friend is viewed as a retreat. The pressure to conform to a loud, gregarious norm can be immense, leading many to believe that their desire for solitude is a flaw. Yet beneath the surface of this perceived inadequacy lies a profound truth. A quiet temperament is not a defect, but a different kind of strength. Embracing this nature does not mean rejecting the world. Rather, it means engaging with it on one's own terms. It involves building deep, trusting friendships rather than collecting a vast array of acquaintances. It means valuing independent thought and calm observation over the noise of the crowd. History is filled with innovators and creators, from the minds behind revolutionary technology to beloved authors, who harnessed their introverted nature to contribute something lasting to the world. This realization was the catalyst for a conversation that began with a book for adults and now extends to a younger generation, offering a guide to navigating a world that often can't stop talking. What's an introvert anyway? To understand this temperament, one must look beyond simple labels. Psychology provides a term for those who look inward: introverts. This is not a single, rigid definition, but a broad category for those who derive satisfaction from the inner life of thoughts and feelings. While extroverts gain energy from social interaction and the external environment, introverts often find themselves recharged by solitude. This does not imply a dislike for people. Indeed, many introverts possess excellent social skills and enjoy company. The difference lies in the source of their energy and their preference for depth over breadth. It is crucial to distinguish introversion from shyness, although the two can overlap. Shyness is rooted in the fear of social judgment or doing the wrong thing, a nervousness about acceptance. Introversion, however, is a preference for lower stimulation. A student might remain silent in class not out of fear of being wrong, but because they are busy processing the information or simply feel no compulsion to speak. Both qualities, shyness and introversion, carry their own advantages, fostering empathy, listening skills, and a conscientious nature. One can be a shy extrovert or a confident introvert. The key is understanding which traits belong to you and how they shape your experience. Are you an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert? The human mind is complex and few people fit perfectly into a single category. The terms introvert and extrovert, popularized by Carl Jung, describe opposite ends of a spectrum. Imagine a ruler with extreme introversion on one side and extreme extroversion on the other. Most people fall somewhere in between, perhaps leaning towards the middle, a group known as ambiverts. Even those who identify strongly with one side may find themselves acting out of character depending on the situation. An introvert might become chatty on a topic they are passionate about, just as an extrovert requires moments of rest. Determining where one falls on this spectrum involves looking at preferences. Do you prefer a small circle of close friends to a large group? Is writing a more natural mode of expression than speaking? Do you feel drained after a long period of socializing, even if you enjoyed it? A preference for deep conversation, a tendency to think before speaking, and a desire for independent work are all markers of an introverted nature. Conversely, those who seek the spotlight, process their thoughts by talking, and feel energized by busy environments lean toward extroversion. Understanding these proclivities is not about limiting oneself, but about self-knowledge. While genetics play a role, personality is not stone. It is pliable. Like a rubber band, we can stretch ourselves to meet the demands of a situation, stepping onto a stage or leading a team, but we must also respect our need to snap back to our resting state to recover. Recognizing what brings comfort and what drains energy allows for a life lived with intention and mastery. Extroverts are great too. There exists in society a pervasive extrovert ideal, the belief that the ideal self is gregarious, alpha, and constantly in the spotlight. This cultural standard often leaves those with quieter dispositions feeling undervalued, particularly in school environments where participation is measured by the frequency of raised hands. Challenging this ideal is not an attack on extroverts. The two personality types are not enemies, they are complementary forces, the yin and yang of human connection. The dynamic between a talkative, take-charge individual and a contemplative, observant one can create a partnership that is greater than the sum of its parts. The goal is not to convert one type into the other, but to illuminate the power of the quiet path. History and modern culture are replete with examples of introverts who have left an indelible mark without compromising their nature. Mahatma Gandhi, famously shy as a child, led a nation through the strength of nonviolent resistance. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated the basketball court while preferring books to crowds. Artists like Beyoncé and Emma Watson, despite their public professions, protect their private, observant selves. Even Albert Einstein, whose solitary focus rewrote the laws of physics, found a balance between his intense work and a small circle of intellectual friends. These figures demonstrate that leadership, creativity, and influence do not require a loud voice. Passion is the engine that drives introverts forward, allowing them to take the stage, captain a team, or lead a movement when the cause matters enough. By accepting one's own style and using the natural gifts of focus, listening, and empathy, the quiet ones can indeed shake the world. Chapter 1. At the age of 9, the allure of summer camp took hold of my imagination. I had devoured novels set in cabins by wooded lakes, picturing a serene existence where I would bond with new friends over shared stories. When I packed my suitcase, it was heavy not with sports gear but with books, novels that I envisioned reading in comfortable silence with a group of like-minded girls, all of us in matching nightgowns, united by the quiet companionship I knew from evenings at home with my family. The reality was a jarring awakening. Camp was not a literary retreat, it was a raucous, unending birthday party. On the very first day, a counselor gathered us to teach a cheer that would become the soundtrack of my summer. R-O-W-D-I-E, that's the way we spell rowdy. Let's get rowdy. The misspelling bothered me, but the demand for constant high-octane energy bothered me more. I tried to play the part, cheering and smiling, but the moment I sought refuge in a book, the coolest girl in the bunk asked why I was being so mellow. The word felt like an accusation. I put my books away, hiding them in my suitcase like guilty secrets, and spent the rest of the summer pretending to be someone I wasn't. This pressure to be rowdy did not end with camp. It followed me into the hallways of middle school, a place where the social currency was noise. As a new student, the cafeteria was the epicenter of this foreign economy. Hundreds of voices bounced off cinder-block walls, and students clustered at long tables, popular girls, athletic boys, cliques that seemed impenetrable. For a quiet observer, the sheer sensory overload was paralyzing. I could barely think, let alone navigate the complex social web that everyone else seemed to manage with ease. Davis, a thoughtful student starting 6th grade, faced a similar trial. On his first day, the noise and chaos were physical assaults. He held his breath until he reached the sanctuary of homeroom, the only place where silence was permitted. The cafeteria was a minefield he navigated with dread, and by the final bell, he was exhausted, not from academic effort, but from the sheer labor of existing in a world designed for the loud. He returned the next day, not because he wanted to, but because he had to, eventually finding a small haven at the front of the bus where he could tune out the roar with earplugs and a book. Introverts and the 5 senses. The exhaustion felt by Davis and myself was not a defect of character. It was a matter of biology. We now understand that introverts and extroverts possess fundamentally different nervous systems. It is a difference in how we process stimulation. To understand this, one might look to a classic experiment involving lemon juice. When a drop of lemon juice is placed on a person's tongue, the mouth produces saliva to balance the acidity. Psychologists found that introverts produce more saliva than extroverts in response to the same drop. We are physically more sensitive to sensory input. This sensitivity extends beyond taste to sound, light, and social interaction. An extrovert's nervous system is less reactive, meaning they crave high stimulation environments, loud music, crowds, bright lights, to feel energized. An introvert, however, reacts more intensely to these same stimuli. A noisy cafeteria or a crowded party can feel like an assault, quickly draining our batteries. We are not necessarily antisocial. We are differently social. We thrive in environments where the volume is turned down, allowing our nervous systems to function at their peak. Recognizing this biological reality is empowering. It means that the need to retreat to a library, a quiet computer lab, or even a bathroom stall is not a sign of weakness, but a necessary act of self-regulation. It is a strategic move to restore equilibrium in a world that often turns the volume up too high. Supposed to? Adolescence is a turbulent sea where social, emotional, and physical needs are tossed together. In this mix, there is often a pervasive sense of how one is supposed to be. We are told we should be outgoing, we should have a wide circle of friends, we should love the spotlight. Julian, a high school senior, recalled acting out in elementary school, stealing pens, being annoying, just to get attention, because he felt ashamed of his natural quietness. It took time for him to realize he could connect with people without putting on a performance. Karina, a 15-year-old writer, felt the pressure to be normal during social interactions, often stumbling over her words because she was trying so hard to say the right thing rather than the true thing. She learned to navigate this by preparing for social situations just as one might prepare for a test. By identifying a few approachable people and planning simple conversation starters, she transformed a terrifying cafeteria landscape into something manageable. The supposed to narrative often equates popularity with loudness. Maggie, a college student, spent years wondering why the bubbly kids were the natural leaders, feeling ignored because she didn't shout for attention. Her perspective shifted only when she encountered a character in a book who admitted to preferring to loan it. It was a revelation. She was not broken. She was simply introverted. The realization allowed her to stop chasing the shoulds, the big groups, the loud roles, and start valuing her own preferences for deep, singular friendships and meaningful pursuits. An animated explanation. Understanding oneself is the first step. Helping others understand is the second. Misunderstandings are common. A quiet demeanor can be mistaken for anger, boredom, or snobbery. A friend might think you are ignoring them in the hallway when, in reality, you are simply lost in thought or overwhelmed by the noise. Explaining this difference in operating systems can bridge the gap. Robbie, a teenager who felt mentally exhausted after prolonged socializing, found it difficult to explain his need for solitude to an extroverted friend. She thrived on the energy he found draining. However, another friend, Drew, an ambivert who understood both sides, used his creative talents to help. He created an animated video explaining introversion and aired it on the school news. The effect was immediate. The abstract concept became concrete for the entire school, validating the experiences of the quiet students and enlightening the loud ones. It demonstrated that being quiet is not a refusal to participate, but a different way of engaging. Standing out quietly. Surviving and thriving in a school environment designed for extroverts requires strategy. It begins with understanding your own needs. You must acknowledge that a mismatch between your temperament and your environment is not a personal failure. If the cafeteria is too much, finding a quiet corner or a library is a valid coping mechanism. Finding your own circle is equally vital. You do not need to be friends with everyone. You only need to find the people who get you. Whether they are athletes, coders, or artists, look for those with whom you can be your authentic self. Communication is the bridge to these relationships. Let your close friends know why you might retreat. Explain the difference in your batteries so they do not take your silence personally. Passion is the great equalizer. When you focus on a project or a subject you deeply care about, the fear of social judgment often recedes. Passion provides a script and a purpose, making it easier to speak up and stand out. And while comfort is essential, expanding your comfort zone is necessary for growth. You can stretch yourself, speaking up in class, joining a new group, knowing that you can return to your quiet niche to recover. Finally, pay attention to your body language. A smile or an open posture can signal friendliness without saying a word, inviting connection even in silence. Chapter 2. Grace sat in the back of the classroom, her frustration growing with every passing month. Every 4 weeks, the school announced the Student of the Month, an award meant to honor hard work and good behavior. Yet, to Grace, it seemed to measure only one thing: volume. The winners were invariably the students who shot their hands up incessantly, blurring out answers before the questions were even fully asked. Grace, by contrast, participated through active listening and careful note-taking. To her, the rapid-fire style of her peers felt less like learning and more like performing for an audience. Despite her excellent grades and perfect behavioral record, the award remained out of reach. Her teachers, well-meaning but misguided, often prodded her to speak more, mistaking her thoughtful silence for disengagement. After months of being overlooked, Grace made a calculated decision. She wanted that recognition. She decided to hack the system, not by changing her personality, but by adapting her strategy. She began to raise her hand immediately when volunteers were asked to read aloud, a low-stakes way to be heard. In discussions, she realized she felt calmer if she spoke halfway through, allowing her time to process the conversation and form a unique perspective. Slowly, the strategy paid off. She hadn't transformed into a chatterbox. She had simply found a way to project her quiet strength. Soon enough, the certificate was hers. Rethinking class participation. The obsession with constant verbal participation is a hallmark of modern education, but it often misses the mark. Participation is not synonymous with engagement. Consider the experience of Brianna, a student whose teacher employed a popsicle stick method. Each student was given 3 sticks at the start of class and had to spend them by speaking 3 times. Rather than fostering deep discussion, the room filled with meaningless noise as students scrambled to get rid of their sticks. Brianna found herself saying empty phrases just to meet the quota, resenting the fact that quality was being sacrificed for quantity. True engagement can look very different. It is the student listening intently, the one connecting dots in their head, the one who speaks only when they have something substantial to add. Research by Mary Budrow revealed that the average teacher waits only 1 second after asking a question before calling on someone. 1 second. This favors those who think while talking, leaving deep processes, those who need time to formulate their thoughts in the dust. Some educators are countering this by introducing think time, a simple pause that allows all students to gather their thoughts. Others use methods like think, pair, share, where students discuss ideas with a partner before addressing the room. If such structures aren't in place, students can advocate for them. Emily, a student who felt pressured by a teacher to speak up, found the courage to write him a note explaining her introversion. She discovered that her teacher was an introvert himself. He simply hadn't realized her silence was a sign of discomfort rather than boredom. By communicating her needs, she changed the dynamic of the classroom. How to be heard in the classroom. While the educational system evolves, there is immense value in learning to make your voice heard on your own terms. Introverts often have profound insights, and studies show that when they do speak, their peers listen because they know the contribution will be valuable. The reluctance to speak often stems from various fears: the fear of being wrong, the pressure of perfectionism, or simply the biological preference for processing information internally before broadcasting it. Overcoming this requires strategic thinking. It is not about becoming the loudest person in the room, but about finding a method that bypasses the anxiety. For some, like a student named Liam, the structured environment of a classroom is actually easier than social conversation because it has rules. You speak, then the focus moves to the next person. There is no chaotic back and forth. Others find success in manipulating the environment. Sitting in the front row can create a sense of privacy, as you cannot see the eyes of the class behind you. Focusing on a friendly face, a teacher, or a supportive classmate can anchor you in a sea of judgment. One of the most effective strategies is the strike early method. I used this myself during law school. The classes were conducted in large amphitheaters using the intimidating Socratic method. Knowing I would eventually be called upon, I prepared comments in advance and raised my hand early in the session. By speaking first, I could choose the ground I wanted to cover before the discussion veered into unpredictable territory. This not only relieved the pressure for the rest of the class, but also established my presence in the room. Davis, the student who once hid behind earplugs on the bus, faced a stark choice in his English class: participate or accept a lower grade. He chose to fight his fear. He forced his hand up, terrified that he would stumble over his words. He felt the physical symptoms of anxiety, the sweat, the racing heart, but he refused to lower his hand. He learned that the anticipation is often far worse than the act itself. Quiet solutions. If your heart pounds at the thought of raising your hand, know that you are not alone and that it is a conquerable challenge. Here are strategies to navigate the noise. Strike early. If you know the topic, prepare a thought in advance and offer it at the beginning. This prevents the anxiety from building up throughout the hour. Identify your entry point. Find the role that suits you. You don't have to be the debater. You can be the one who asks a thoughtful question, builds on another's point, or plays devil's advocate. Use notes. There is no shame in writing down what you want to say. Having a script can prevent your mind from going blank. Follow up. If you couldn't summon the courage to speak in the moment, email your teacher afterward with your thoughts. It demonstrates that you are engaged and thinking deeply. Observe the room. Look around. You will notice that other students make mistakes, say silly things, or stumble, and the world doesn't end. Extend that same forgiveness to yourself. Find your passion. It is infinitely easier to speak when you care about the subject. When your desire to share an idea outweighs your fear of attention, your voice will find its way out. Chapter 3. For many quiet students, few phrases in the English language induce as much dread as the teacher's enthusiastic declaration, "Okay, everyone, get into groups." It is a moment that signals the end of autonomy and the beginning of a social negotiation that can feel more exhausting than the academic work itself. The solitary haven of the desk is abandoned for the chaotic pod, where grades often depend not just on individual mastery, but on the ability to navigate a complex web of personalities, volume levels, and social dynamics. The modern classroom has shifted its geography. The rows of the past, which allowed for private thought and individual focus, have largely been replaced by clusters of desks facing one another. This architectural change represents a philosophical shift in education, one that values collaboration above all else. While the intention behind this shift to foster teamwork and communication is noble, the execution often leaves the introverted student feeling besieged. The assumption is that creativity and learning are inherently social acts, born of brainstorming and constant dialogue. However, for those who need silence to process and solitude to spark their best ideas, this environment can be suffocating. It can feel as though the world has decided that thinking is a team sport and that the player who prefers to practice alone is somehow doing it wrong. But there is a way to navigate this landscape without losing oneself. In fact, the group needs the quiet member far more than it realizes. The rise of the clusters. This phenomenon, often termed the new groupthink, operates on the belief that creativity is a product of the crowd. It suggests that the best ideas emerge from people talking over one another in a room, rather than from a single mind working in deep concentration. Consequently, schools have embraced the cooperative learning model. Students are graded on class participation, which is frequently interpreted as how much you talk, rather than how well you listen. For the introvert, this constant demand for interaction drains the mental battery. It is not that we are incapable of cooperation. Rather, the method of thinking out loud is foreign to our nature. We often do our best work when we can retreat, formulate a complete thought, and then present it to the group. The cluster setup often short-circuits this process, demanding instant feedback and rapid-fire exchanges. However, research suggests that the most effective teams are not those where everyone is talking, but those that balance the extrovert's ability to generate energy with the introvert's ability to focus and refine. The new groupthink overlooks a crucial historical fact. Many of the world's greatest inventions and artistic works were created in solitude, then brought to the world. The challenge for the quiet student is not to become a loud collaborator, but to find a way to inject the power of solitary thought into the group dynamic. T-shirts and quiet leaders. Consider the experience of a student named Brianna. Her history class was assigned a project to create a mock business. The class was divided, and Brianna found herself in a group dominated by loud, enthusiastic extroverts. Immediately, the energy in the cluster skyrocketed. The others began shouting out slogans, high-fiving over logo ideas, and talking over one another about marketing strategies for their t-shirt company. To an outside observer, it looked like the very model of successful collaboration. Brianna, however, felt her energy plummet. She couldn't get a word in, and the sheer volume of the brainstorming made it difficult for her to think. But as she sat back and observed, she noticed something critical. Amidst the excitement about colors and slogans, no one was discussing the numbers. No one had calculated the cost of materials, the profit margin, or the manufacturing logistics. The group was all engine and no steering wheel. Taking a deep breath, Brianna didn't try to shout down the loudest member. Instead, she waited for a lull in the noise, a moment of breath, and calmly laid out the financial reality she had been calculating in her head. "If we sell them for that price," she said quietly, "we will lose money on every shirt." The group fell silent. The energy shifted from chaotic enthusiasm to focused problem-solving. Brianna didn't need to be the cheerleader, she became the architect. By taking on the role that required deep focus and analysis, the role the others were ignoring, she not only saved the project, but became its de facto leader. She proved that leadership isn't about who talks the most, it's about who makes the most sense. The observant editor. This dynamic is frequently played out in school newspapers and yearbooks, environments that seem tailored for the outgoing but are often anchored by the quiet. A student named Davis found himself in such a position. He was not the type to dominate a pitch meeting or demand that his stories be featured on the front page. In a room full of aspiring reporters shouting out headlines, Davis was the one taking notes. He noticed that while everyone was fighting for their own ideas, no one was seeing the bigger picture of how the publication flowed. He began to function as the synthesizer. He listened to 3 different people arguing about 3 different angles on the same story, and then, in a quiet voice, proposed a solution that combined the best elements of each. Because he spoke rarely, his words carried weight. His peers learned that when Davis spoke, it was to offer a solution, not just to hear his own voice. He eventually rose to the position of editor-in-chief, not by changing his personality, but by leaning into it. He realized that an editor is, by definition, an observer and a listener, traits that are the birthright of the introvert. The loud students generated the raw material, but it was the quiet editor who curated it into something meaningful. Thriving within a group. Surviving the cluster does not require a personality transplant. It requires strategy. If you find yourself dreading the next group assignment, consider these tactical approaches to finding your place in the noise. First, choose the right role. Every group needs a variety of distinct jobs. If you are uncomfortable with the free-for-all of brainstorming, volunteer immediately for a role that allows for independent work. Be the researcher, the scribe, the editor, or the artist. Say, "I'll handle the slide deck design," or "I'll draft the written report." These roles allow you to retreat, work your magic in solitude, and then return to the group with a valuable contribution. You are still collaborating, but on your own terms. Second, speak early or speak last. This may seem contradictory, but both are powerful. Speaking early establishes your presence and prevents the anxiety of waiting. However, speaking last allows you to play the synthesizer role, summarizing what everyone else has said and offering a concluding direction. This is a high-value contribution that earns respect without requiring constant chatter. Third, utilize the power of the pair. If the full group of 4 or 5 is overwhelming, turn to the person next to you and discuss an idea one-on-one before presenting it to the whole table. This think-pair-share method breaks the intimidation of the group into a manageable conversation. Finally, remember that your silence is a tool, not a defect. In a room full of people talking, the listener holds the power of perspective. You are the one who sees what is missing, who hears the contradictions, and who notices the details others gloss over. The group may be loud, but it is often the quiet voice that guides it to the finish line. Chapter 4. Every year, Grace's middle school selected a group of 8th graders to serve as peer leaders, mentors who helped the incoming 6th graders navigate the turbulent transition to a new school. Grace, remembering her own shy and uncertain start, felt a pull to apply. She wanted to be the guide she had once needed, specifically to spot the quiet kids who might be feeling lost in the shuffle. The selection process, however, was designed in a way that seemed to disadvantage someone with her temperament. It involved a group interview where applicants were observed interacting with one another. As Grace sat in the circle, she watched the dynamic unfold exactly as she had feared. The screaming extroverts dominated the airwaves, jumping over each other's sentences to prove their enthusiasm. Grace remained silent, observing the flow, waiting for a gap in the noise. She knew that fighting for airtime wasn't her style. She preferred to listen and speak only when she had something meaningful to add. During the session, she noticed a boy who was even quieter than she was. He had tried to speak a few times, only to be cut off by a louder voice. Grace saw his frustration. Instead of using the next lull to promote herself, she turned to him. "Did you want to say something?" she asked, opening a door that had been slammed shut by the group's volume. He nodded, grateful, and shared his thought. Grace then built upon his idea, weaving her own perspective into the conversation. When the list of new peer leaders was posted, Grace's name was on it. So was the boy's. By using her natural empathy to empower someone else, she had demonstrated a kind of leadership that the teachers were looking for, one that didn't require a megaphone, but a keen eye and a willing ear. What is a leader? If you walk into most schools or offices, you will likely find a prevailing belief. Leadership equates to loudness. We are conditioned to think that the person at the front of the room, the one with the booming voice and the magnetic charisma, is the natural leader. This extrovert ideal suggests that to lead, one must be sociable, dominant, and constantly in the spotlight. When quiet people do step into leadership roles, they are often relegated to the background, taking notes or handling the logistics, while the real leaders handle the vision. This definition is not only narrow, it is incorrect. Leadership is not about personality style, it is about the substance of one's character and the quality of one's ideas. The most effective leaders are often not those who crave attention, but those who are driven by a cause. They lead because they want to advance a project, solve a problem, or help a community, not because they enjoy the sound of their own voice. Consider the landscape of modern success. Bill Gates, a self-professed introvert, built a technological empire and a philanthropic foundation not through charisma, but through intense focus and deep thinking. Eileen Fisher, the clothing designer, used her own discomfort with restrictive clothing to build a fashion empire, leading her company with a quiet, collaborative style. Warren Buffett, one of the world's most successful investors, is known for his solitary study of financial reports, a habit that allows him to make decisions that others miss. These figures prove that one does not need to change their nature to command respect. They need only to harness their own unique strengths. A human rights leader. History offers no better example of quiet strength than Eleanor Roosevelt. As a child, she was painfully shy, so serious and solemn that her mother nicknamed her Granny. She often felt like an outsider in her own social class, preferring serious conversation to the frivolous banter expected of a debutante. When she married Franklin D. Roosevelt, a charming and ambitious politician, many doubted she could fulfill the public role of a politician's wife. She was terrified of public speaking, her voice often rising to a high pitch when she was nervous. And she possessed a deep need for solitude. Yet, when Franklin was paralyzed by polio, it was Eleanor who kept his political career alive. She forced herself to speak at fundraisers and rallies, trembling but determined. She did not do this for the applause, she did it because she believed in the work. Her introversion, which made her sensitive to her own feelings, also made her profoundly empathetic to the suffering of others. She became a champion for the downtrodden, the poor, the minorities, the forgotten. During the Great Depression, while her husband managed the macroeconomics of the nation, Eleanor traveled to the coal mines and the bread lines, listening to the stories of those who were struggling. She brought these stories back to the White House, serving as the conscience of the administration. She never lost her need for quiet. She suffered from what she called Griselda moods, periods where she needed to withdraw into silence to recharge, but she learned to manage her fear. She went on to become a delegate to the United Nations, where her patient, firm, and listening-based negotiation style was instrumental in the passage of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. She proved that a shy, serious child could grow up to change the world, not by becoming loud, but by becoming brave. Class President Davis, the student who once wore earplugs to survive the school bus, found his own path to leadership. His journey began in the safety of the math team, a place where his ability to focus for long periods was an asset, not a liability. As he grew comfortable, he became a captain, realizing that he enjoyed helping the group succeed. By 8th grade, Davis saw things in his school that needed fixing. He was a natural observer, and he noticed the friction points that others ignored, like the rigid cafeteria rules that prevented friends in different homerooms from eating together. He decided to run for student body president. It was a terrifying prospect. His opponent was the most popular girl in school, a social butterfly who campaigned on vague promises of more parties and fun. Davis, a quiet Vietnamese-American boy who often felt like an outsider, worried he didn't stand a chance, but he had a secret weapon: substance. While his opponent relied on charm, Davis relied on a concrete plan. With the encouragement of his cousin Jessica, he crafted a platform addressing the real issues students faced, like the cafeteria seating and the need for a peer tutoring program. When it came time for speeches, he was nervous. He didn't have the jokes or the easy swagger of his rival, but when he spoke, the students listened. They heard a candidate who had actually thought about their problems and had solutions. On election day, the school chose substance over style. Davis won. He succeeded not by trying to be the fun president, but by being the thoughtful one. He showed that in the end, people want a leader who cares about them, not just one who can entertain them. Leaders as listeners. I discovered my own leadership style in high school, almost by accident. I was never the type to run for class president, but I loved writing. I joined the school's literary magazine, a smaller, quirkier alternative to the bustling school newspaper. The staff was filled with artists and poets, people who, like me, appreciated a quieter environment. I eventually became the editor. I didn't lead by barking orders. I led by reading people's work with care, offering thoughtful feedback, and creating a space where they felt safe to express themselves. At the end of the year, a staff member wrote in my yearbook that he respected my leadership. I was stunned. I hadn't realized that what I was doing, listening, supporting, guiding, was leadership. Laurie, a high school track athlete, found a similar groove. She was an introvert who would read novels in the stands at Yankee Stadium while everyone else cheered. When she became captain of her track team, she didn't try to be the rah-rah cheerleader type. Instead, she used her powers of observation. She noticed the team was fractured, with distance runners and sprinters rarely interacting. She implemented small, quiet changes to build unity. She organized group stretches and team dinners. She didn't give locker room pep talks. Instead, she connected with her teammates one-on-one, asking about their training, their sleep, and their lives. She built trust through individual relationships rather than mass appeal. Under her steady, quiet guidance, the team broke school records. Her teammates listened to her not because she was the loudest, but because they knew she was looking out for them. Leading without shouting. If you feel the pull to lead but dread the spotlight, know that there is a path for you. Here is how to harness your quiet power. Play to your strengths. Do not try to be the entertainer if that is not you. Like Davis, focus on your ideas, your plans, and your ability to solve problems. People will vote for competence. Follow your passions. It is impossible to lead effectively if you do not care. Choose a cause, whether it is a club, a charity, or a sport, that matters to you. Your genuine passion will fuel your courage. Connect and listen. Use your natural ability to build deep, one-on-one connections. You do not need to win over the whole room at once. Build your alliances one person at a time through empathy and listening. Empower others. The best leaders are those who help others shine. As a listener, you are uniquely positioned to identify the strengths of your team members and give them roles where they can succeed. Lead by example. You do not always need a speech. Showing up early, working hard, and staying dedicated speaks louder than any megaphone. Chapter 5. The world often presents a specific social ideal. the person who can walk into a room of strangers and emerge an hour later with 5 new best friends. We see this effortless mingling and assume it is the gold standard of human connection. For the introvert, however, this model can feel alien. We do not typically seek to collect acquaintances like trading cards. We prefer depth to breadth, opting for a few profound connections over a multitude of superficial ones. School acts as a magnifying glass for these differences. It is a fishbowl where social interactions are constantly on display, analyzed and graded by the silent, and sometimes not so silent, jury of peers. In this environment, finding one's tribe can be a daunting task. Gail, a teenager from Ohio, articulated a sentiment many of us feel but rarely say aloud. True friendship is rare and sacred. For her, a friend isn't just someone to sit with at lunch, it is someone to whom she can bare her soul, a reciprocal relationship where burdens and joys are shared equally. She distinguishes sharply between people I talk to and friends. This preference for intimacy shapes how we spend our time. Julian and his best friend Andre, who attends a different school, have built a friendship that requires no performance. Their time together is not defined by high-octane activities or large groups, but by the comfort of just being. They might watch videos or simply talk, dissecting their lives and offering advice with a wisdom that seems beyond their years. Interestingly, this deep dyad became a foundation for a wider circle. Julian initially feared that introducing new people into their dynamic would dilute it or expose him to judgment. Instead, he found that the friends of his friend were like-minded souls. They created a social world that mirrored their temperament: small gatherings, shared music, meaningful conversation, proving that a rich social life does not require a crowd. Falsely bubbly. The pressure to conform to the extroverted ideal can lead to a phenomenon I call being falsely bubbly. Lucy, a shy British student, fell into this trap. She joined a clique of girls who were her opposites, loud, gregarious, and constantly together. To fit in, Lucy donned a mask of high energy, suppressing her natural need for quiet. While she enjoyed their company in small doses, the relentless groupness of their dynamic began to wear her down. Driven by a desperate need for solitude, Lucy began retreating to the library during lunch. She didn't have the vocabulary to explain her introversion, she just knew she needed to breathe. This withdrawal, however, was misinterpreted. One day, her friends cornered her, their hurt and anger palpable. "Why are you ignoring us?" they demanded. To them, her absence was a rejection, a sign of snobbery or meanness. Lucy was shaken. She realized that her falsely bubbly persona had created a false expectation. When she dropped the act to care for her own needs, her friends felt betrayed because they didn't know the real Lucy. They only knew the performance. The confrontation was a turning point. A hierarchy was imposed. She was told she must attend lunch and announce her movements. It was a wake-up call. Lucy realized that conditional friendship that required her to suppress her true nature, was not friendship at all. Over time, the group fractured. She drifted away from those who demanded the performance and deepened her bonds with those who accepted her quiet side. Her true friends began to advocate for her, creating space for her voice in conversations, proving that authentic connection thrives only when the mask is removed. Frenemies. The desire to belong can sometimes trap us in toxic dynamics, particularly when we are young and unsure of our worth. Georgia, a dancer who had been labeled quiet since preschool, found herself in such a bind. The label had become a burden, making her question if her nature was a flaw. In an attempt to fit in, she clung to a group of girls whose friendship was laced with venom. These frenemies made her the target of their insecurities. They mocked her clothes, her music, and, relentlessly, her quietness. One afternoon, they dared her to scream, trying to force a reaction, to break her silence for their amusement. Georgia refused, not out of defiance, but out of a deep, paralyzing discomfort. She wanted to cry, but she held her ground, unwilling to perform on command. Relational aggression, bullying that attacks social standing and emotional well-being, is a silent epidemic, often weaponized against quiet kids who are perceived as unlikely to retaliate. It creates a prison where the fear of being alone outweighs the pain of being mistreated. Raj, a math enthusiast, faced a similar choice when his so-called friends threatened to ostracize him if he moved to an advanced class. He had to weigh the value of their companionship against his own potential. Georgia eventually found the courage to break free. She realized that walking alone was better than walking with people who made her feel small. The transition was lonely at first, a terrifying void where a social circle used to be. but in that space, she found Sheila. Their friendship began not with a bang, but with a shared laugh in science class, a quiet, organic connection that grew into something solid. They didn't need to be popular, they just needed to be real. Georgia learned that her quiet nature was not a liability but a filter, screening out the superficial and allowing only the genuine to pass through. Natural listeners. If the social world feels like a stage where everyone is improvising, the introvert often feels like the audience member who forgot their lines. Small talk can be agonizing. The weather, the latest gossip, it often feels insubstantial. However, we possess a secret weapon that can transform these interactions, the power of the interview. When I find myself drained by the pressure to be chatty, I flip the script. I stop trying to be interesting and start being interested. I ask questions. People love to talk about themselves, and they are desperate to be heard. By shifting the spotlight onto the other person, we not only relieve the pressure on ourselves, but also unlock the potential for genuine connection. Ira Glass, the host of This American Life, built a career on this principle. He admits he is not a natural storyteller, but a natural listener. His genius lies in his ability to create a space where others feel safe enough to reveal their truths. This is the introvert's superpower. We are not just hearing words, we are reading the subtext, the emotion, the pauses. When you listen with intent, you become a magnet. You make people feel seen in a world that often looks right through them. Use your words. However, listening has a limit. A conversation cannot be a monologue, and a friendship cannot be a one-way street. There is a danger in becoming so good at listening that you erase yourself from the equation. We often wish that our friends could read our minds, that they would intuitively understand our need for silence or our hurt feelings. But people are not mind readers. A father once told his crying son to use your words, a simple instruction that holds profound truth for us all. If we want to be understood, we must speak. This does not mean we must shout. It means we must articulate our needs and our inner world. It means saying, "I'm not mad, I just need to recharge," or "I have an idea about this." Sharing your thoughts is not an act of ego. It is an act of generosity. It allows the other person to know the real you. Friendship is a reciprocal exchange of vulnerabilities. If you hide your true self to keep the peace, you deny your friend the chance to connect with the person you actually are. Forging quiet friendships. There is no algorithm for finding a soulmate, but there are strategies for the quiet heart. Be yourself. It sounds cliché, but it is the iron law of connection. Do not feign extroversion to attract friends. You will only attract those who like the mask. Authentic friends love the person behind it. Risk solitude. It is better to eat lunch alone than to eat with people who make you feel invisible. Toxic relationships drain more energy than solitude ever could. Have the courage to walk away. Join a group. Paradoxically, structured activities are a haven for introverts. A club or a team provides a shared focus, a third object that takes the pressure off direct conversation. You can bond over the task, allowing friendship to grow sideways, slowly and organically. Start small. You do not need a crowd. Follow the strategy of Mitchell, who moved often as a military kid. Find one good friend. Anchor yourself there. From that secure base, you can branch out if you wish, or simply enjoy the richness of that single, strong bond. Team up. Use an extroverted friend as a wingman. They can break the ice, and you can navigate the slipstream, engaging in the deeper conversations that follow. Ask questions. Lean into your listening skills. Ask, and then ask a follow-up. It shows you care, and it gives you a break from talking. Empathize. Remember that the loud kid might be just as insecure as you are. Empathy bridges the gap between the quiet and the loud. Use your words. Silence is a sanctuary, but do not let it become a wall. Speak your truth, for the right people will always want to hear it. Chapter 6. When I was in middle school, my friends threw me a surprise birthday party. It was an intimate gathering, just a half-dozen girls, good music, and hours of laughter. By all accounts, it was a lovely evening. Yet amidst the joy, I felt a pang of shame. I looked around the room and thought, is this it? I imagined that if one of the popular kids had a surprise party, the house would be bursting with 70 or 80 people. Despite the effort my friends had made, I felt like a social failure because my celebration didn't look like the crowded, raucous events I thought were normal. Looking back, I realize how misplaced that worry was. If 80 people had actually crammed into my living room, I would have been miserable. I would have been overwhelmed, drained, and searching for the nearest exit. I was judging my life by a metric that didn't apply to me. There is no rule that says a good time requires a crowd. Some people thrive with a social circle of 600. Others are happiest with 6. Both are valid. The key is to understand your own social battery. Just as a phone needs recharging, introverts need to step away from the noise to replenish their energy. A party isn't a failure if you leave early. It's a success if you enjoyed the time you were there and respected your own limits. The magician's greatest trick. For many introverts, the standard way of celebrating, proms, homecoming dances, massive house parties, can feel like a gauntlet rather than a gift. But you can rewrite the rules of attendance. Consider Carly, a student who belonged to a group she affectionately called the Artsy Weirdos. When junior prom approached, the pressure to have the best night ever was immense. The expectation was a night of non-stop high-energy dancing with the entire grade. Carly and her friends decided to hack the experience. Instead of throwing themselves directly into the chaos, they started with a pre-hangout at her house. They ate takeout, took pictures, and relaxed in a familiar environment before heading to the dance. By the time they arrived at the prom, they were grounded and ready, and when the noise became too much, they knew the best part of the night was still waiting for them. The after-party in Carly's kitchen, where they cooked a late-night meal and deconstructed the evening in the comfort of their own quiet circle. Davis, a student leader, took a different approach. He realized that while he liked people, he hated the format of the typical high school party. In college, when invited to a keg party or a loud bash, he would politely decline. But he didn't stop there. He performed a social sleight of hand. He would immediately counteroffer, "I can't make it tonight, but do you want to grab coffee tomorrow?" Or, "I'm going to check out that new art exhibit this weekend. Want to come?" He worried at first that this would make him an outcast. He feared that by rejecting the parties, he was rejecting his social life. But the opposite happened. People accepted his invitations. He found that even the most extroverted students often welcomed the break from the loud, superficial party scene to engage in a real conversation. By the time he entered a campus talent show to perform magic tricks, he was terrified that no one would cheer for him. But when he walked on stage, the auditorium erupted. He realized then that he knew half the people in the room, not because he had partied with them, but because he had built real friendships with them. One quiet coffee at a time. The social butterfly and the painter. It is a common misconception that all introverts are socially awkward. Many are social butterflies who can work a room with ease but pay a heavy price for it later. Noah, a filmmaker, was one such student. He could tell great stories and float between groups, gamers, journalists, singers, but he never felt he truly belonged to any of them. He would leave parties feeling a profound loneliness, a sense that while everyone else was bonding, he was just performing. He would fall asleep, hoping that one day he would find a way to connect that didn't feel like work. The truth is, the best years of your life are not necessarily in high school. For many introverts, social comfort comes later when they have more control over their environment, but you don't have to wait for adulthood to curate your world. Laurie, a student who found large gatherings exhausting, created her own tradition. She started hosting painting parties. It began with just one friend from her art class. They would set up canvases, put on music, and paint until midnight. Soon, other girls asked to join. It wasn't a party in the traditional sense. There was no pressure to shout over bass-heavy music. It was a parallel play environment where they could be together while focusing on a shared creative task. They would eat, talk about life, and sometimes forget to paint altogether. By changing the activity, Laurie changed the dynamic, turning social time from a drain into a source of energy. Be safe. A serious note on coping mechanisms. In the struggle to manage the sensory overload of parties, some students turn to alcohol or drugs to numb their anxiety. This is a dangerous trap. While substances might offer a temporary feeling of relaxation or liquid courage, they are ultimately depressants that can heighten anxiety and depression once the high wears off. Reliance on a chemical crutch prevents you from developing the actual social muscles you need. The goal is to learn how to be comfortable as yourself, not as a chemically altered version of yourself. If you feel you cannot endure a social situation without being intoxicated, that is a strong signal that you should either leave the situation or seek help from a trusted adult. True social confidence comes from knowing your limits, not from blurring them. How to party like an introvert. If you find yourself obligated to attend a loud, crowded event, you don't have to go in defenseless. Here is a survival guide for the reluctant partygoer. Find a wingman. Do not walk into a packed room alone. Arrange to meet a friend beforehand so you can enter as a unit. Having one familiar anchor makes the sea of strangers much less intimidating. Start on the fringes. Don't dive into the center of the dance floor. Acclimate yourself at the edges of the room where the noise is lower and you can observe the scene before participating. Cultivate a bubble. Focus your attention on the 2 or 3 people you are with. Ignore the chaos around you and treat the conversation as if you were in a private living room. The bathroom break. Never underestimate the restorative power of a bathroom stall. If your battery is redlining, retreat to the restroom or a quiet hallway for 5 minutes of silence. It can reset your nervous system. Arrange an out. Set a time limit for yourself. Tell your parents or a ride to be ready at a specific time. Knowing there is a definitive endpoint can make the duration much more bearable. Stay a little longer. Paradoxically, once you have your escape plan, try staying 30 minutes longer than you want to. Sometimes, once the initial anxiety fades, you might find a second wind and actually enjoy yourself. Initiate your own plans. If you are tired of declining party invites, issue your own. Invite friends to do what you want to do. Pizza, a bike ride, a movie. You might be surprised how many people are relieved to do something different. Chapter 7. Imagine the perfect Saturday night. You are cocooned in your favorite sweater, a bowl of snacks within reach, and a gripping novel or a video game loaded and ready. You are in your element, perfectly content in your solitude. Then the silence is broken by a ding. A notification lights up your phone screen. You click it, and there it is. A photo of your classmates laughing hysterically at a party, looking like they are having the time of their lives. In an instant, your contentment evaporates. The fear of missing out, FOMO, sets in. You begin to question your choices. Is my life boring? Should I be out there? Even though you were happy just a moment ago, the digital window into other people's curated joy makes your quiet evening feel inadequate. Social media presents a unique challenge for the introvert. We are naturally drawn to intimate settings and solitary recharge time, yet our phones serve as constant reminders of the noisy, social world we are stepping away from. Lola, a high school student, felt this conflict deeply. She loved her quiet hobbies, but felt a pang of jealousy when she saw her friends posting about their adventures. She felt torn between her authentic desire for solitude and the digital pressure to perform. Over time, however, Lola flipped the script. She realized she didn't need to attend every event to feel connected. She began using social media to stay in the loop, texting and sending snaps to friends while they were out, allowing her to maintain her bonds without draining her battery. And when she truly needed to recharge, she learned the power of the Do Not Disturb button, reclaiming her right to disconnect without guilt. Space to share. The internet is not just a source of anxiety. For the introvert, it can be a powerful equalizer. In a loud classroom, it is often the quickest thinkers and loudest voices that dominate. Online, however, you have time to formulate your thoughts. You can edit, delete, and perfect your words before you press send. Noah, a film enthusiast, decided to opt out of the selfie Olympics. Instead, he used his platforms to share his passion for cinema. He realized that social media didn't have to be about, look at me. It could be about, look at this thing I love. For introverts, the internet is a vast landscape where we can find our tribe. If you are the only kid in your school who loves a specific type of anime or obscure history or coding, you can find thousands of like-minded souls online. This digital space allows for quiet expression. You can post your photography, your poetry, or your political views without the physical anxiety of standing on a stage. The validation of a like or a supportive comment can be a genuine confidence booster, proving that your inner world has value to others. Wi-Fi friendships. There is a long-standing question. Do we become different people online? Research suggests that for the most part we remain ourselves. Extroverts tend to have more friends and post more frequently, while introverts often prefer to observe or chat in small groups. However, the digital world does offer a unique pathway to friendship for the quiet. Noah found his community in the realm of MMORPGs, massively multiplayer online role-playing games. In worlds like World of Warcraft, the pressure to make small talk is replaced by a shared mission. You bond with others by slaying dragons or solving puzzles, not by awkward icebreakers. These Wi-Fi friendships can be incredibly meaningful, providing a sense of belonging that might be missing in the school hallways. However, a word of caution is necessary. Digital friends are real, but the connection is often specialized. A guildmate might have your back in a raid, but are they the person you can call at 3 a.m. when you are heartbroken? It is important to distinguish between the companionship of shared interests and the deep, messy reliability of IRL in real-life friends. Furthermore, remember that the internet is a curated reality. People post their highlights, not their breakdowns. Comparing your internal struggles to someone else's digital highlight reel is a recipe for unhappiness. IRL Robbie, a thoughtful teenager from New Hampshire, viewed friend counts with skepticism. To him, collecting hundreds of Facebook friends was just a digital version of the high school popularity contest, a game he had no interest in playing. He valued depth. A friend, in his eyes, was someone who knew his failures, not just his status updates. Yet, Robbie used the digital world as a training ground. In person, he often felt too anxious to crack a joke, fearing it would land poorly, but via text or chat, he had the buffer of time. He could craft the perfect, witty response. This digital success proved to him that he was funny. He just needed to transfer that confidence to the physical world. To bridge the gap, Robbie took a job that was an introvert's nightmare, a cashier at a supermarket. It forced him into hundreds of micro-interactions a day. Paper or plastic? How are you today? The sheer repetition desensitized him to the fear of talking. He used the job to practice the wit he had honed online, slowly merging his digital persona with his real self. How to get the most out of social media. You do not have to delete your accounts to find peace, but you should curate your experience. Retain your privacy. You are not a public figure. Keep your accounts private. If you prefer a small circle of friends in real life, why allow hundreds of strangers into your digital life? Value. True friends use social media to deepen the bonds you already have, sharing memes, making plans, checking in, rather than treating it as a tool to collect new acquaintances. Express yourself. Use the platform to showcase your creativity. It is often easier to share a drawing or a poem online than to show it to someone face-to-face. Let your work speak for you. Find yourself. Use the internet to explore your niche interests. Join forums or follow pages that educate and inspire you. Take a media break. The Do Not Disturb function is self-care. Disconnecting for an hour, especially before bed, allows your brain to quiet down and reminds you that your worth is not tied to your notifications. Chapter 8. On a rainy Wednesday evening in March 1975, the garage door of a suburban home in Menlo Park, California, was left open to the damp air. Inside, a group of 30 engineers gathered for the first meeting of the Homebrew Computer Club. Among them was a 24-year-old calculator designer named Stephen Wozniak. With his shoulder-length hair and beard, Woz fit the visual profile of the counterculture, but his demeanor was painfully shy. He took a seat in the back, listening intently as the others discussed the Altair 8800, a new do-it-yourself computer kit. He didn't say a word to anyone. Woz was a genius, a man who had been obsessed with electronics since childhood. But he was also an introvert who preferred the company of circuit boards to crowds. That night, however, his mind was racing. He went home and began to sketch a design for a computer that would be different, one that used a keyboard and a screen, making it accessible to ordinary people. He worked in solitude, the way he worked best, often late into the night at his Hewlett-Packard cubicle. But a great invention often needs a voice. Enter Steve Jobs. Jobs was Wozniak's friend from high school, but in terms of temperament, they were polar opposites. While Woz was the quiet engineer who built the machine, Jobs was the charismatic visionary who saw its potential to change the world. Jobs wasn't shy. He was a force of nature, a master salesman who could convince anyone of anything. He saw Woz's creation and immediately said, "We should sell this." This partnership, the Woz and the Jobs, the quiet creator and the loud promoter, became the foundation of Apple Computer. It is a quintessential example of how introverts and extroverts can form a symbiotic relationship, each providing what the other lacks. A powerful partnership. History is replete with such duos. It is rarely the story of a lone genius, but rather the story of a pair. Think of the civil rights movement. We all know the booming voice of Martin Luther King Jr., the man whose speeches moved a nation. But fewer know of Rosa Parks, the quiet woman whose act of silent defiance on a Montgomery bus sparked the boycott that King led. Parks was described as soft-spoken and timid, yet her quiet fortitude was the anchor for the movement. King provided the thunder, Parks provided the lightning, or consider the world of pop culture. The Rolling Stones are defined by the swagger of Mick Jagger, the ultimate extrovert frontman. But the band's musical soul is Keith Richards, who is far happier in the shadows with his guitar than in the spotlight. In the world of Facebook, the extroverted Sheryl Sandberg became the public face and operational leader, allowing the introverted founder, Mark Zuckerberg, to focus on the product and strategy. These partnerships work because they are built on a fundamental truth. We need each other. The introvert offers depth, caution, and focus. The extrovert offers breadth, energy, and action. One creates the product, the other sells it. One writes the speech, the other delivers it. It is a puzzle where the pieces lock together perfectly. Yin and Yang. In Chinese philosophy, the concept of yin and yang describes how opposite forces are actually interconnected and interdependent. Yin is associated with the dark, the passive, and the moon, yang with the light, the active, and the sun. Neither is superior. They are two halves of a whole. This dynamic plays out in friendship just as it does in business. Meet Jessica and Quincy. Jessica is a classic extrovert, loud, impulsive, and always the center of attention. Quincy is an observer, quiet, thoughtful, and cautious. On the surface, they seem like an unlikely pair, but their friendship works because they balance each other. When Jessica is about to make a rash decision, Quincy is the voice of reason, the brakes that prevent her from going off a cliff. When Quincy is stuck in his head, overthinking and hesitant, Jessica is the gas pedal, pushing him to take risks and have fun. Jessica pulls Quincy onto the dance floor. Quincy pulls Jessica into a meaningful conversation. This balance is not always easy. It requires understanding and negotiation. The introvert must explain that their need for silence is not a rejection of the friend, but a biological necessity. The extrovert must learn that silence is not a vacuum to be filled, but a space to be respected. When both sides understand the other's operating system, the friction turns into fuel. Pairing with extroverts. If you are an introvert, you might naturally gravitate toward other quiet people. It is comfortable, you speak the same language. But there is immense value in seeking out your opposite. Here is how to make an opposite friendship thrive. Respect the battery. Be clear about your energy levels. Tell your extroverted friend, I love hanging out with you, but I need to go home and recharge. A true friend will not take this personally. The gas and brakes system. Recognize your roles. Let your friend push you out of your comfort zone occasionally. Go to that party. Join that club. In return, offer them the gift of slowing down. Invite them for a quiet walk or a movie night. Divide and conquer. In group projects or social situations, play to your strengths. Let the extrovert handle the presentation or the initial introductions. You handle the research, the writing, or the deep one-on-one conversations that solidify connections. Translation services. Sometimes extroverts struggle to understand the quiet signals. You might need to be explicit. I'm not mad, I'm just thinking. Conversely, you can help them by interpreting the quiet signals of others they might miss. Appreciate the shield. An extroverted friend can be a wonderful social shield. They can deflect unwanted attention, fill awkward silences, and handle the small talk, allowing you to relax and observe until you are ready to engage. Chapter 9. In a world that often prizes the loudest voice, creativity offers a powerful alternative, the ability to speak volumes without saying a word. For many introverts, the internal world is rich and vibrant, teeming with ideas that struggle to find their way out through conversation. Yet when these thoughts are channeled into a creative medium, be it writing, coding, art, or music, the result is often a profound and distinct form of communication. Karina, a reserved teenager from Brooklyn, found her voice not in the cafeteria, but in the strings of a ukulele and the pages of a notebook. Her passion for sci-fi and fantasy allowed her to construct worlds where she had total control, a stark contrast to the unpredictable nature of social interaction. Her teacher, recognizing the quiet talent in her classroom, created Coffee Shop, a low-stakes open mic event. It was here that Karina discovered the addictive thrill of sharing her work. She realized that she didn't need to be the center of attention to be heard. She just needed to let her work speak for her. The validation she received from her peers, their laughter, their suspense, was a revelation. It proved that her quiet nature was not a barrier to connection, but a unique vantage point from which to create. This path is well trodden. J.K. Rowling, the mind behind Harry Potter, conceived her wizarding world while staring out the window of a train, her imagination filling the silence with magic. For her, as for many introverts, the act of creation is a solitary pursuit that yields public treasures. Dear Diary, writing is perhaps the quintessential introverted profession. As author John Green notes, it allows one to tell a story without the pressure of eye contact. For many, the first step is the diary, a safe harbor for truth. My own childhood diary, locked and hidden, was a place where I could organize the chaos of adolescence. It taught me that my thoughts were valid and that I could articulate them with clarity. Modern diaries take many forms. Maggie uses her phone to record dreams and fragile ideas she isn't ready to share. Jared, a high school student, used free writing as a pressure valve for his anxiety. Before bed, he would hammer out his thoughts on a keyboard, transferring the buzz from his mind to the screen, allowing him to sleep with a lighter spirit. This private expression is not about crafting a masterpiece. It is about the act of release. The reluctant blogger. Sometimes, the bridge between private thought and public expression is digital. Matthew, a student who rarely spoke in class, found an unexpected outlet in a school blogging assignment. Freed from the immediate pressure of a classroom discussion, he could take his time to formulate his thoughts. He wrote about his passion for K-pop, a niche interest that he hadn't shared with his peers. To his surprise, the blog became a beacon. A classmate who shared his interest reached out, sparking a friendship that might never have formed in the silence of the classroom. Matthew didn't change his personality. He remained the same quiet student. But the medium allowed him to reveal a vibrant side of himself that others had missed. T. For Jaden, a 12-year-old with a vivid imagination, drawing is the bridge between his inner and outer worlds. His sketches of dragons and mythical creatures allow him to invite others into his mind without the need for explanation. Similarly, Julian found that photography offered a way to engage with the world on his own terms. Instead of feeling excluded by the social whirl of Instagram, he and his friend Andre began to curate their own vision of beauty, finding meaning in the play of light and shadow in their Brooklyn neighborhood. This creative impulse is a hallmark of introverted success. Pixar, the studio that revolutionized animation, is led by introverts like Ed Catmull and Pete Docter. Docter, the director of Up and Inside Out, admits that drawing was his childhood escape, a way to create a universe where he felt safe. Even as a successful director, he acknowledges the drain of collaboration, often retreating to solitude to recharge, a reminder that the need for quiet time does not disappear with success. It fuels it. The power of independence. The secret weapon of the introvert is the capacity for deliberate practice. While others may crave constant stimulation, the introvert is often content to be alone with their craft, honing a skill through endless repetition. This lonely work is the foundation of mastery. Kobe Bryant, shooting 1,000 jump shots a day, the young pianist Conrad Tao practicing for hours before school, Steve Wozniak building circuit boards alone in his room, these are not stories of isolation, but of incubation. Wozniak credits his solitude for his expertise. If he had been more social, he might never have built the first Apple computer. This single-minded focus, often viewed as odd in adolescence, is the very trait that leads to exceptional achievement in adulthood. Expressing yourself the quiet way. The journey from private thought to public expression is personal, but there are signposts to guide you. Find your medium. Experiment until you find the tool that feels like an extension of your mind, whether it's a coding language, a paintbrush, or a musical instrument. Produce, dive deep. Use your natural ability to focus to practice, refine, and master your craft. Seek inspiration. Look for role models who share your temperament. Knowing that successful creators often started as quiet kids can be a powerful motivator. Claim privacy. You do not have to share everything. Keep some projects for yourself. The act of creation is valuable even if no one else sees it. But don't forget to share. When you are ready, let your work bridge the gap. You might be surprised by how many people have been waiting to hear what you have to say. Chapter 10. For many, the world of athletics is synonymous with noise. The roar of the crowd, the shouting of coaches, the high fives and chest bumps of team camaraderie. To an observer like Maggie, a college student who preferred books to bleachers, sports seemed like the exclusive domain of the jocks, the loud, the aggressive, the extroverted. She assumed that her nature disqualified her from the field. This belief changed in 9th grade when she discovered yoga. It wasn't a team sport. There were no whistles or scoreboards, just her, a mat, and the rhythm of her own breath. The sun salutations she practiced in the quiet of her room became a morning ritual, a way to center herself before the chaos of the school bus. Maggie discovered a secret that many introverts eventually find. Athletics can be a sanctuary. getting out of your head and into your body is a powerful antidote to the constant mental chatter that often accompanies a thoughtful nature. Exercise releases endorphins, the brain's natural mood elevators, which can dissolve social anxiety and replace it with a quiet euphoria. It is not about winning, it is about the release. Brittany, another student, found her outlet in dance. The crowded school dances were a nightmare of social pressure, but a swing dancing class was different. It had structure, it had rules. She didn't have to make small talk, she just had to follow the steps. In the movement, she found a way to connect with others without the need for words, a silent conversation that suited her perfectly. Introspective on the mound. Even in the most competitive team sports, the introvert has a unique advantage, the ability to focus. Consider the role of the pitcher in baseball. It is a solitary position in the middle of a team game. All eyes are on you, yet you are alone on the mound. This paradox suited a young athlete named Jams perfectly. He was a thinking pitcher. While others might feed off the crowd's energy, James fed off his own internal calibration. He treated every pitch like a chess move, analyzing the batter, the count, and the mechanics of his own arm. His quiet nature allowed him to block out the screaming fans and the pressure of the moment, narrowing his world down to the 60 feet 6 inches between him and the catcher. He wasn't the loudest guy in the dugout. He didn't lead the chants, but his teammates respected him because he delivered. His leadership was in his performance, in the calm stability he brought to the chaotic middle innings. He proved that you don't need to be a rah-rah guy to be the anchor of a team. Beating bronze. Sometimes, the quiet athlete shines brightest in individual pursuits. The solitude of long-distance running, the rhythmic silence of swimming, or the singular focus of figure skating can be deeply appealing to those who drain quickly in groups. Take the story of a young swimmer named Jenny. She loved the water because it was the one place where no one could talk to her. Beneath the surface, there was only the sound of her own breathing and the rush of the water. It was a moving meditation. However, competition brought a different kind of noise. Before big races, the pool deck was a frenzy of nervous energy, people chatting, pacing, psyching each other up. Jenny found this draining. Instead of joining the fray, she developed a routine. She would put on her headphones, pull her cap low, and visualize her race in perfect detail. She swam the event in her mind before she ever touched the water. This visualization was her superpower. By the time the gun went off, she had already swum the race a dozen times in her head. She knew exactly how her body would feel at each turn. Her quiet preparation allowed her to conserve her energy for the physical exertion, rather than wasting it on social anxiety. She didn't just swim to win medals, she swam to find peace. And in doing so, she found she was faster than she ever imagined. Chapter 11. Jessica Watson was not raised in a traditional classroom. She was raised on the waves. Growing up on a 52-foot boat with her family, she developed a quiet resilience that belied her shy demeanor. At age 11, a story captured her imagination. Jessie Martin had sailed around the world solo at 18. Jessica decided then and there that she would do the same, but she would do it younger. She would face the vast, terrifying ocean alone. To an outsider, Jessica seemed an unlikely candidate for such a bold feat. She was soft-spoken and kept her dream guarded at first. But internally, she was building a fortress of knowledge. She devoured information on navigation, weather patterns, and boat mechanics, transforming herself into an expert before she even set sail. When she finally convinced her parents and sponsors to back her voyage, she was 16. On October 18, 2009, she departed on Ella's Pink Lady, embarking on a 9-month odyssey of solitude. The silence of the open ocean did not frighten her, it embraced her. While she had satellite communication to talk to family, she often let the phone ring, preferring the company of the wind and her own thoughts. She named her weather vane Parker and spoke to seabirds, finding comfort in a world stripped of social noise. Even when disaster struck, a collision with a tanker, knocked down waves that turned her boat sideways, or accidentally boiling her pasta in diesel fuel, her introverted nature proved to be her greatest asset. Her ability to stay calm, focused, and self-reliant allowed her to navigate 24,285 miles and return to Sydney Harbour as the youngest person to sail solo around the world. The largest dose of lemon juice. We tend to stereotype adventurers as adrenaline junkies, loud, brash thrill-seekers who laugh in the face of danger. However, research suggests a different reality. Sociologist Gunnar Breivik spent decades studying extreme sports athletes and found that many, particularly mountain climbers, are calm, introspective individuals. The difference lies in how our brains handle reward. Extroverts often have a more active dopamine response, meaning they feel a stronger buzz from conquering a challenge or winning a competition. This can sometimes lead to rash behavior, like driving too fast, in pursuit of that high. Introverts, by contrast, have a more mellow reaction to rewards. We are less likely to be blinded by the potential glory and more likely to focus on the mechanics of survival. Breivik's study of a successful Norwegian Everest expedition illustrates this perfectly. Mount Everest is the ultimate high-stimulation environment, the largest dose of lemon juice imaginable. One might assume that a team of extroverts would fare better in such extreme conditions. Yet, the expedition that succeeded was composed largely of introverts. Their independence, self-will, and ability to visualize success without needing constant external validation made them the perfect candidates for the grueling, solitary slog to the top of the world. The scientist with a nose for observation. Adventure is not always about physical peril. Sometimes it is about intellectual daring. Charles Darwin, one of the most influential introverts in history, changed our understanding of life itself through his quiet powers of observation. As a young man, he was prone to getting lost in thought, once walking right off a path while daydreaming. When he was offered a position on the HMS Beagle to survey South America, the ship's captain, Robert Fitzroy, nearly rejected him. Fitzroy, a believer in physiognomy, judging character by facial features, thought Darwin's nose suggested a lack of energy and determination. He doubted this quiet, unassuming man could handle a 5-year voyage. He was wrong. Darwin's introversion was the key to the mission's success. While others might have grown bored or restless, Darwin spent years in a cramped cabin, meticulously cataloguing his observations of plants, animals, and fossils. He didn't just see the world, he absorbed it. It was this deep, solitary processing that allowed him to connect the dots and formulate the theory of evolution. Without his quiet persistence, the voyage of the Beagle would be a footnote in history rather than a turning point in science. Underwater adventure. Justin was a tinkerer. From a young age, he saw potential where others saw junk. His parents supported his habit, taking him to scrap yards to collect old motors and electronics. At 14, he decided he wanted to build a submarine. After 2 failed attempts, he asked his father for a 6-foot plastic drainage pipe. For 6 months, Justin worked in the solitude of his basement. He wasn't lonely, he was in a state of flow. When a snowstorm closed his school, he didn't rush out to play with friends. He spent the entire day threading wires, transforming the pipe into a functioning one-man submersible using parts from a fishing boat, a jet ski, and a soda machine. When spring arrived, he tested his creation in a lake. He spent 30 minutes underwater, eating Oreos and watching fish, perfectly content in his plastic bubble. His panic only set in when he ran out of cookies. Justin's story is a testament to the power of introverted focus. His ability to work alone for long stretches was not a social deficit. It was the engineering engine that allowed him to achieve the impossible. Don't let fear be a thief. Adventure can also be a social act. Rita, a shy teenager from Indiana, decided to spend her sophomore year in Ecuador. It was a leap into the unknown, a new language, a louder culture, and a new family. Before she left, a neighbor gave her a note that became her mantra. Fear is a thief. Rita realized that fear steals opportunities, memories, and growth. In Ecuador, she found that her introverted nature was a bridge, not a barrier. Because she was a listener, she formed deep bonds with her host family. She didn't become an extrovert, she simply became a brave introvert. Upon returning, she was asked to give a speech to hundreds of people. The old terror of public speaking flared up, but she remembered her mantra. She had navigated a foreign country alone. Surely she could handle a microphone. As she spoke, the fear receded, replaced by the calm of knowing she had something valuable to share. Her adventure had expanded her world, proving that you can travel far from your comfort zone and return with a stronger sense of self. The Introvert's Guide to Adventure. If you feel the call of the unknown, here is how to answer it on your own terms. Pursue your passion. Let your curiosity be your compass. Whether it is sailing, science, or engineering, deep interest will carry you through the fear. Listen and observe. Use your natural powers of observation. Like Darwin or Rita, you can learn more by watching and listening than by trying to dominate the environment. Recharge. Even on an adventure, protect your downtime. Insist on moments of solitude to process your experiences, just as Jenny the swimmer did in Japan. Live by Eleanor Roosevelt's words. Do one thing every day that scares you. It doesn't have to be climbing Everest. It can be raising your hand or sitting with a stranger. The habit of bravery builds over time. Trust yourself. You are more capable than you think. Do not let the quiet label fool you into thinking you are fragile. You are made of strong stuff. Chapter 12. Montgomery, Alabama. December 1st, 1955. A public bus exhaled its brakes and came to a stop. A woman in her 40s climbed aboard. Her feet were swollen, her shoulders ached from a long day hunched over an ironing board in a basement tailor shop. She moved with quiet dignity to the first row of the colored section. The bus filled up, the air thick with the unspoken tension of a segregated city. When the white section reached capacity, the driver turned and ordered her to give up her seat. She uttered a single word. It was not a shout. It was not a speech. It was a quiet, firm refusal that would ignite the civil rights movement and alter the course of history. "No." The driver threatened arrest. "You may do that," she replied softly. When the police arrived and asked why she wouldn't move, she didn't scream or fight. She simply asked, "Why do you all push us around?" Rosa Parks is often reimagined in our collective memory as a loud, imposing figure, a warrior who stared down injustice with a fiery gaze. But those who knew her remembered her differently. They described her as timid and shy, a woman of radical humility and quiet fortitude. She was small in stature, sweet in demeanor, and possessed the courage of a lion. Her power lay not in her volume, but in her stillness. At a rally held in her honor, where thousands packed a church to hear Martin Luther King Jr. thunder against oppression, Parks stood silent. Her mere presence was enough to galvanize a city. Her life poses a question that challenges our modern assumptions. How can one be shy and courageous? How can quiet be strong? As Parks herself wrote in her autobiography, "Quiet strength, there is no contradiction. The most profound changes often begin in silence." The rubber band theory of personality. We are born with a temperament, a biological setting that predisposes us to certain behaviors. The science of personality tells us that this wiring is real. We cannot simply swap our nature like a set of clothes. However, we are not prisoners of our biology. We are elastic. Think of personality as a rubber band. An introvert can stretch. We can expand into the world of the extrovert, giving speeches, leading teams, navigating crowded parties when the moment demands it. But like a rubber band, we cannot stay stretched forever. If pulled too far for too long, we snap. The art of living well as an introvert is knowing when to stretch and, crucially, when to return to our resting state. Consider Wendy Kopp. As a student at Princeton, she conceived a revolutionary idea, a course of high-achieving college graduates who would teach in America's under-resourced schools. She called it Teach for America. But ideas need fuel, and in this case the fuel was money, millions of dollars. Wendy was not a natural salesperson. She was a classic introvert who avoided social clubs and found clarity in solitary morning runs. She didn't schmooze, she researched. She retreated to the library, immersing herself in data. When she finally began reaching out to potential donors, she didn't charm them with small talk. She convinced them with substance. She wrote hundreds of letters. She met with the formidable Ross Perot and answered his rapid-fire questions with calm precision. When her organization launched, the demands of leadership stretched her to her limit. During the first training institute, she was so overwhelmed by the constant interaction that she hid in her office during meals. It was the introverted equivalent of hosting a party and locking yourself in the bedroom. But she learned. She realized the cause was bigger than her comfort. She stretched. She learned to lead meetings, to inspire staff, to be the face of the movement. But she also honored her nature. She would wake at dawn to work in the solitude she craved, recharging her battery so she could stretch again the next day. Books abroad. Robin was tired of the feedback. Speak up more. Participate. Be more social. Teachers seemed to view her preference for listening as a deficit to be corrected. But Robin knew who she was. She loved deep conversations with close friends, playing the piano, and, above all, reading. Books were her sanctuary, a place where she could travel without moving. She wanted to share this sanctuary with others. With her best friend, she hatched a plan. A book drive for schools in Malawi, Africa. They found a partner in the African Library Project, but the logistics were daunting. They needed to collect 1,000 books and raise money for shipping. The fundraising required Robin to do the one thing she feared most: ask for help. She started with family, a safe first step. But to reach her goal, she needed the support of her school principal. The meeting was terrifying. She prepared like she was studying for an exam, arming herself with facts about literacy rates. Despite her preparation, the principal rejected her idea for a dress-down day fundraiser. Robin didn't crumble. She pivoted. She organized a penny war between the boys and girls, a competition that required her to stand before a Boy Scout troop, 24 restless boys and their parents, and speak. She was nervous, yes, but her passion for the cause acted as a shield. She wasn't speaking for herself, she was speaking for the children in Malawi. 6 months later, Robin stood in a post office surrounded by 23 enormous boxes containing 1,177 books. She had turned her quiet love of reading into a loud act of generosity. She hadn't changed her personality to do it. She had used her personality to fuel it. Collaborating for a cause. Sometimes the best way to change the world is to team up with your opposite. We saw this with Brian and James, the co-presidents of their student council. Brian, the extrovert, thrived on the energy of the crowd. He loved the microphone, the jokes, the spotlight. James, the introvert, preferred the strategy, the planning, the substance. When they launched a campaign for a local food pantry, they split the duties naturally. Brian warmed up the crowd, getting the students laughing and engaged. Then James took the stage. He didn't try to be a comedian. He spoke with quiet gravity about food deserts and health, explaining why their help was needed. The combination of Brian's energy and James's sincerity was potent. Dozens of students signed up. It was a perfect harmony of style and substance. Mentorship. Carly, a theatre student, found her purpose in the quiet moments between the noise. She volunteered as a counselor for a drug resistance program, working with younger children. In a room full of chaotic energy, she noticed the ones on the margins. The kids playing in the sand alone, the ones reading in the corner while others splashed in the pool. Because she was one of them, she didn't try to fix them. She didn't force them to join the group games. She validated their solitude with her own presence, showing them that it was okay to be quiet. She became a mentor, not by lecturing, but by understanding. She realized that her empathy, born of her own introversion, was a superpower that allowed her to connect with the kids who were invisible to everyone else. Shaking the world quietly. Mahatma Gandhi, a slight, soft-spoken man who fainted during his first court case out of shyness, led a revolution that toppled an empire. He did not do it with violence or bluster. He did it with a philosophy of non-violence and unyielding truth. He proved that you can shake the world gently. You do not need to lead a nation to make a difference. You can start where you are. Find a powerful cause. Passion is the greatest antidote to fear. When you care deeply about something, whether it's books, food pantries, or justice, your self-consciousness recedes. Use your strengths. Do not try to be the loud leader if you are the quiet strategist. Use your ability to research, to plan, to listen, and to think deeply. Make meaningful connections. You don't need 1,000 followers. You need a few dedicated allies. Build relationships that go deep. Stretch your rubber band. Accept that you will be uncomfortable. You will have to make that phone call, give that speech, or lead that meeting. Do it, and then give yourself the grace to rest. Persevere. The world will say no. Principals will reject your ideas. Donors will not answer your letters. Like Rosa Parks, like Wendy Kopp, like Robin, you must find the quiet resolve to keep going. Chapter 13. You might assume that the spotlight is the natural enemy of the introvert. We are, after all, the people who tend to avoid being the center of attention. However, there is a surprising truth hidden in theaters, concert halls, and lecture podiums around the world. Many of the people standing in the glare of the lights are introverts. Taking the stage is a unique process for each person. Some introverts find comfort in the script. The ability to memorize lines and control an interaction offers a safety net that spontaneous conversation does not. Others view it as a form of armor. When they are on stage, it isn't really them up there, but a character. And some are simply terrified, pushing themselves forward through sheer grit because their passion outweighs their fear. If you are the type who wants nothing to do with the stage, that is perfectly valid. It took me decades to grow comfortable with public speaking, but if you feel a pull toward performance, know that your quiet nature is not a disqualification. In fact, it might be your secret weapon. A shy introvert shines. Carly, a high school senior, was an introvert but not shy. She had spent years blending into the safety of the school chorus and sports teams. But in her final year, she landed a starring role in the spring musical. Suddenly, she wasn't just one voice in a choir, she was singing a solo, alone, under a spotlight. The prospect was terrifying. But Carly found that her background as an athlete prepared her. She treated the play like a game. It required practice, focus, and execution. Her director gave her a piece of advice that anchored her. Don't look at the audience. Look at the balcony or the light booth. By directing her gaze just above the crowd, she created a buffer. She delivered a fantastic performance, proving that the discipline of the quiet athlete translates perfectly to the stage. Then there is Ryan, a boy from Georgia who was both introverted and shy. For him, the spotlight was a significant hurdle. Yet, when he was cast as a prisoner in a Civil War drama, he didn't just memorize lines. He used his introverted superpower, deep research. He visited the actual historical site of the prison, imagining the suffering and the squalor until he felt he understood the soul of his character. When he stepped on stage, he wasn't Ryan the shy teenager anymore, he was the prisoner. His performance was powerful not because he was loud, but because he was deeply empathetic. He had transformed his sensitivity into art. The fairy godmother sings soprano. It seems like a contradiction, the performing introvert. Yet, look at the cultural landscape. Beyoncé, the ultimate stadium filler, describes herself as shy and private. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was famously reclusive off stage. Steve Martin, a wild and crazy stand-up comic, admits to being fundamentally shy. Emma Watson, who played the outspoken Hermione Granger, is a self-described introvert who finds big parties overwhelming. For these performers, the stage is not a violation of their nature, it is a necessity. As pediatrician Marianne Kouzougianakis notes, their passion cries out to be expressed. The stage allows them to share their inner world safely, and once the curtain falls, they can retreat to their solitude to recharge. Victoria, a 14-year-old girl, usually hid in the chorus. She was smart and studious, but never sought the lead. That changed when her mother, a busy professional, made a deal. She would skip an important meeting to see the school play only if Victoria landed a lead role. She wanted her daughter to believe in herself. Victoria auditioned for the fairy godmother in Into the Woods. To her shock, she got it. The role required her to sing soprano notes that were high above her usual range and to be suspended 6 feet in the air. It was a nightmare scenario for a shy girl, but Victoria applied her introverted focus. She practiced relentlessly, training her voice and her mind. On opening night, instead of shaking, she felt a strange calm. She hit every note. Her mother, watching from the audience, heard people whispering in amazement, "She can sing! Who knew?" Free trait theory. How can a quiet person act out of character without feeling fake? Professor Brian Little offers an answer with his free trait theory. He suggests that while we are born with certain traits, we can adopt free traits, behaviors that are out of character, when we are driven by a core personal project. This means an introvert can act like an extrovert for the sake of something they love. I experience this myself. Today I speak to thousands of people about the power of introversion. I smile, I gesture, I make jokes. I look comfortable. But I am not an extrovert. I am an introvert who cares deeply about my message. My passion for empowering quiet kids allows me to stretch my personality, to perform, and then to go home and read a book in silence. I wasn't always this way. In 8th grade, I was paralyzed by a Shakespeare improv assignment. Forced to play Lady Macbeth without a script, I froze. My face burned, my hands shook, and I had to sit down in shame. I had turned the pressure up so high that it felt like a life-or-death situation. I wish I had known then what I know now, that preparation is the antidote to panic. An audience of dolls. Caitlin, a 5th grader, was so quiet that her 2nd grade teacher had recommended special education, mistaking her silence for a lack of ability. When she was assigned a 5-minute oral report on Amelia Earhart, the fear was paralyzing. Her father, a fellow introvert who had learned to master public speaking through Toastmasters, stepped in. He didn't tell her to just be confident. He gave her a system. First, they researched until she was an expert. Then, they set up a stage in the living room. He arranged 10 stuffed animals around the room, bears, bunnies, and dolls, and told her they were her classmates. He instructed her to make eye contact with each of them as she spoke. It felt silly, but it worked. She practiced her speech 12 times in front of that plush audience. By the time she stood in front of her real class, the muscle memory took over. She delivered a flawless presentation. How to shine in the spotlight. If you find yourself facing an audience, here is your survival guide. Prepare. There is no substitute for knowing your stuff. Master your content so completely that you could say it in your sleep. Study the experts. Watch speakers who have a style similar to yours. You don't have to be a comedian if you are serious. Be a compelling storyteller instead. Slowly build the pressure. Start by practicing alone. Then practice in front of a stuffed animal. Then a parent. Then a friend. Effective practice happens when anxiety is at a manageable level, 4 to 6 on a scale of 10, not when you are in full panic mode. Familiarize yourself. Visit the room beforehand. Stand on the stage. Visualize the audience. Remove the fear of the unknown. Breathe. It sounds cliché, but deep breathing works. Inhale through your nose, expanding your stomach like a balloon, and exhale slowly. It calms the nervous system. Smile. It is a biological hack. Smiling makes you feel more relaxed and signals to the audience that you are friendly. They will likely smile back. Connect. Find a friendly face in the crowd, a nodder, a smiler, and lock eyes with them. Let their engagement fuel you. Look outward. Remember, it's not about you, it's about what you are giving to the audience. You are there to teach, to entertain, or to inspire. Shift the focus from your fear to their benefit. Chapter 14. A bedroom with a Do Not Disturb sign. A fire escape overlooking a quiet alley. A solitary hoop on a driveway at dusk. A specific armchair in the school library, tucked away behind the stacks. A basement filled with the hum of a video game console. These are not just locations, they are survival mechanisms. They are restorative niches. Think back to childhood. Did you ever drape a sheet over a card table to create a fortress? Did you climb high into the branches of a tree to watch the world without being part of it? That instinct, the desire to build a sanctuary, remains vital as we grow. A restorative niche is a physical or mental space where the static of the world fades, allowing you to return to your factory settings. It is where you lower your defenses, process the day's intake of noise and emotion, and recharge your battery. The term comes from Professor Brian Little, the scholar who taught us that we can act out of character when necessary. But acting has a cost. After a day of stretching our personalities to meet the demands of school or social life, we need a place to snap back. This niche allows us to find our optimal zone of stimulation, that sweet spot where we feel most like ourselves. Going there is not an act of retreat, it is an act of reset. Bathed in Christmas lights, Gail, an Ohio student, attended one of my talks and felt a jolt of recognition. She realized she was living without a sanctuary. Her life was a constant stream of low-grade noise, the living room TV, the chatter of family, the sensory clutter of a messy bedroom. She had no place to decompress. Inspired by the concept of the restorative niche, she decided to terraform her own environment. She started with her bedroom, clearing the chaos of old papers and clothes. Then, she addressed the lighting. The harsh overhead bulb was too aggressive, so she strung old Christmas lights across the ceiling. When she plugged them in, the room was bathed in a soft, moody glow. It wasn't an expensive renovation, but the psychological shift was immense. She had created a haven. Lola, another student, treats her bedroom as a charging station. "You're not going to leave your house without your phone charged," she says. "That's how I feel about myself." For her, the niche is a place to consume weird documentaries and research random facts without judgment. It changes with the seasons, hibernation in winter, a fire escape with a smoothie in summer, but the function remains the same, a place to be alone, together with her interests. The restorative stall. Even the most accomplished public speakers need to hide. Brian Little, a man who commands standing ovations, found that the performance of being an extrovert left him depleted. After a speech at a military college near Montreal, he was invited to a lunch he knew would drain him completely. Desperate for solitude, he invented a passion for boats and told his hosts he wanted to walk along the river to admire the vessels. They left him alone, and he spent the hour pacing the riverbank, recharging his social battery. When the college moved to a city with no river, Little had to improvise. During lunch breaks, he would retreat to a bathroom stall. He would sit there, sometimes lifting his feet so no one would recognize his shoes, stealing moments of silence in the most unglamorous of places. This need for a break is biological, not antisocial. However, it can be misunderstood. Remember Lucy, whose friends felt rejected when she tried to eat lunch alone? A study of teenagers confirmed that while high school seniors often respect the need for solitude, middle schoolers tend to view it with suspicion. There is a fine line between a restorative break and hiding out of fear. Bailey, a middle school student, ate lunch in a bathroom stall every day, not to recharge but to escape the terror of the cafeteria. This is different. A true restorative niche is a place you go to strengthen yourself, not a place you go to flee from life permanently. It is a pit stop, not a permanent residence. Fortress of solitude. Even superheroes have limits. Batman has the Batcave. Superman has the Fortress of Solitude. These icons of strength understand that to save the world, one must occasionally leave it. Rupal, a math enthusiast, had a ritual. After school, she would vanish into her room for exactly 1 hour. Her mother, though eager to hear about her day, learned to respect the closed door. Rupal wasn't sulking, she was processing. After 60 minutes of music and reading, she would emerge, refreshed and ready to engage. Her brother Raj had a different version. His niche was the kitchen counter. He didn't need total isolation, he just needed parallel play. He would read or game while his mother cooked, together in the same room but separate in their mental spaces. Tyler, a Minnesota 7th grader, found his peace outdoors. For him, the woods were a natural noise-canceling headphone. Hunting and fishing required silence, making them the perfect introverted hobbies. When he couldn't get to the lake, his backyard trampoline served as a substitute, a place to suspend himself in the air, momentarily disconnected from the earth. Restorative headphones. But what if you share a room? What if your house is small and loud? Karina shared a room with a sister and had no lock on the door. She learned to build a portable niche. She would put on headphones, blast music, and write stories, creating a sound barrier that signaled, "I am not here right now." Julie, a teenager who faced the chaos of a school bus every morning, used the same tactic. She wasn't a morning person, and the social pressure of the bus was too much before 8 o'clock a.m. She would slide into a window seat, put in her earbuds, and stare at the passing trees. She wasn't being rude. She was calibrating her mind for the day ahead. How to create a restorative niche. You do not need a renovation budget to build a sanctuary, you just need intention. The bedroom sanctuary. Change the lighting, add pillows, clear the clutter, make your room a place that invites you to exhale. A quiet corner. If you lack a room, find a chair, claim a corner of the library, find a spot that feels yours. Nature. A tree, a park bench, or a walk around the block can reset your nervous system. Your own head. When you are trapped in a crowd, use headphones, a book, or deep breathing to create an internal fortress. The right activity. Sometimes the niche is an action. Cooking, showering, or running can be a meditative space where the mind can wander freely. The restroom. Never underestimate the power of a locked stall for 5 minutes of peace. Chapter 15. One summer, Jenny, the quiet swimmer whose story we've followed, faced a perfect storm of social obligation. First came a weekend birthday party, packed with people and constant interaction. She returned home desperate for a break, only to be shipped off immediately to a week-long sleepaway camp. It was a high-energy, rowdy environment where she spent days pretending to be an extrovert just to survive. When she finally came home, her social battery wasn't just low, it was empty. But her family, excited to see her, had planned a welcome-home dinner and a movie night. They wanted to hear every detail of her trip. They wanted connection. Jenny wanted silence. The collision was inevitable. That night, Jenny exploded. There was screaming, door slamming, and tears. It was a classic introvert hangover meltdown. Her mother later realized the mistake. They had ignored Jenny's desperate need for a restorative niche. They had pushed a depleted battery to run a marathon. This dynamic plays out in households everywhere. The family home is supposed to be a sanctuary, but for an introvert it can often feel like just another crowded room. Siblings bargain for attention, parents ask a million questions after school, and the noise of daily life penetrates every wall. Scratching at the door. For introverts, the transition from school to home is critical. After 7 hours of navigating hallways, cafeterias, and classrooms, our nervous systems are vibrating with overstimulation. We are like deep-sea divers coming up for air. We need to decompress before we can function on land again. Parents often misunderstand this. They see a child walk through the door and immediately ask, "How was your day? What did you learn? Who did you sit with?" They are trying to connect, but to the exhausted introvert it feels like an interrogation. Consider the Coke bottle effect. All day at school, the introvert is shaken up by noise, by social pressure, by the effort of focusing. When they get home, the pressure inside the bottle is immense. If a parent tries to twist the cap off immediately with questions, the result is an explosion. But if the bottle is allowed to sit quietly for an hour, the pressure settles, the cap can be opened safely, and the conversation can flow. Open door policy. Negotiating this space requires communication. It means setting boundaries that respect the introvert's need for solitude without shutting out the family entirely. One strategy is the after-school buffer. Establish a rule. For the first 30 minutes or hour after getting home, there are no questions and no chores. The introvert gets to retreat to their niche, their room, a treehouse, a quiet corner, to recharge. But boundaries go both ways. If you ask for solitude, you must also offer connection. An open door policy can be a literal or metaphorical agreement. Perhaps you agree that when your door is closed, you are recharging and shouldn't be disturbed unless it's an emergency. But when the door is open, you are available and willing to engage. This signals to your family that your withdrawal is temporary and not a rejection of them. Cats and dogs playing nicely. Families are often a mix of temperaments, a mixed species household of cats, introverts, and dogs, extroverts. The extroverted sibling who wants to wrestle or chat the moment they get home isn't trying to be annoying. They are seeking their own form of recharge through connection. The introverted parent who needs quiet might seem distant to an extroverted child. Understanding these differences changes the dynamic from conflict to choreography. The extrovert learns that the introvert's silence is not anger. The introvert learns that the extrovert's energy is not an attack. We can learn to play together by respecting our different operating systems. We can have parallel play, where family members are in the same room but doing different things, one reading, one gaming, one cooking. We can schedule quiet hours, where the house volume is turned down. We can appreciate that love doesn't always look like constant conversation. Sometimes it looks like sitting comfortably in silence knowing you are safe with the people who know you best.